Right. So I will still repeat this introduction because video does not help me do my job. I'll start with Rose. Rose is with UKTI and she is responsible for this region and for mining activities. And Rose just came back from Mongolia and she was also involved in President Nazarbayev's visit to UK. So she will be probably able to cover this state level of discussions. Then Ayuna Nichayeva with London Stock Exchange. As you know, Kazakhstan exchange signed an MOU with LSE, so we want Ayuna to cover this. Nick Clark, he is a CEO of Central Asia Metals, one of probably very interesting projects in Kazakhstan, and also have exploration properties around the country and in Mongolia. And Andrew with AMEC. Andrew has considerable experience in the region. He spent, was it 6 years in total?
7 years.
6 or 7 years in there, and I think he's got very good perspective of what's going on there. I will also want to introduce Alexander Yakubchik, who is with Orsu Metals, and he's got his views on what's going on in the country because their deposit is there. Hope he will not be too pessimistic. And we will want David Pierce's involvement on critical side of the story because there are quite a few things going on with that part as well. So let's start. As you know, Kazakhstan is now undergoing a major change in legislation and all the regulatory regime. All these famous 100 steps of President Nazarbayev, and part of it is a change in mining legislation and reporting. As I mentioned, President Nazarbayev visited UK in the beginning of November. So there were a couple of things reached there and signed there. So I want to start with asking Ayuna on this MOU signed between Kazakhstan Stock Exchange and London Stock Exchange. How will it help companies in Kazakhstan to attract financing, and how will it affect your relationships with investors from there?
Thank you very much, Alexei. I wanted to start off with mentioning that the MOU is actually more than just an agreement on exploring potential for geolistings. It covers the collaboration on all aspects, including training, education, corporate governance, and also developing the local market overall. There is a specific point. Well, we have been friends with the Kazakhstani Stock Exchange for a long time, but we've never had any such agreement in place. And we thought that this timing was actually very fortunate because with the country undergoing the changes and the reforms and the Astana as an IFC project and the Kazakhstani Stock Exchange proposed moving to Astana, I think it was a very good time to start actually looking at some specific points where we can cooperate. So one of the main parts was the exploring opportunities for simultaneous listing and seeing, doing a gap analysis to see whether there are any differences, or there are any differences. So, looking at the differences in, the regulatory environment, in the market structures, to see how we can facilitate those listings. In terms of the companies, the companies will benefit, I think, in a way that they will have a better understanding of what listing routes they can take, rather than us trying to say just come to London. We'd like to work with the local market, the local exchange, and see whether we can offer all range of potential listing routes. And if simultaneous listing on the Kazakhstan Stock Exchange and the London Stock Exchange is one of them, then it's great, because I think it's important that the companies, particularly the larger companies, tap into the local market as well as the international market. So that this is the basis of the agreement. Obviously, we will follow up with very, very specific points. We will do some certain events, behind the closed door events, and also open seminars in Almaty and Astana early next year to follow up on that. So, watch the space, and hopefully we'll make some progress in due course.
Yep, thank you. Nick.
Can I just ask a question on that? Being an AIM-listed company currently, and we're fairly well regarded, I think, on the exchange and the manner and means in which we deal with our shareholders. How is any advantage going to come in listing on case if it's indeed required? Will there be a shortcut for somebody who's listed on an international exchange going back onto case? Because hitherto it's been quite a involved and expensive process to list on case, even though I was listed on the London Stock Exchange.
Thank you very much, Nick. Central Asia Metals is indeed a very well regarded company, and I think your performance is a testament to how a good quality company can withstand challenging market conditions. In terms of a shortcut, we haven't gone to that stage yet, but I will take your point into account. I think it's really important to look at the existing companies, the ones that are both on main market and AIM, and see how they can benefit from that. So that's a really good point. I'll take note of that.
Yeah, Nick, you being CEO of AIM-listed company operating in Kazakhstan on a very specific, I don't know if I can call it probably can call it a deposit. And I don't know if you're involved in this reform at all. So I would want to ask you what's your view on how this should progress, as opposed as it is progressing.
No, I haven't been specifically involved in the reforms. I'm not unaware of them. Obviously, we keep very close tabs of how it's happening with some of our advisors in country. Obviously, I hear the pronouncements and know that the system is moving very much, or they want to move towards a more open Australian style system license issuing, and they announced that in non-specific license areas you may be able to acquire a license within 1 day.
Yep.
Those who operate in the region will know this as not really being very practical, but it would be nice to see if the system can move towards that sort of quicker response. Our experience has been, in terms of permitting and what have you, at variance with that. I'll leave it at that. But it is a long, drawn-out process. And of course, for a listed company, delays mean money. They can cost you a lot of money just in delay time, because you've employed people, you're looking to expend money, you may have capital available to expend on a project, but if a delay occurs, all it does is increases your costs, and therefore your chance of bringing a project in on time and budget is seriously hampered. So that can be a disincentive. I think the system in Kazakhstan has to look for foreign direct investment, absolutely, but you have to ask yourself, why has such a prolific, resource-rich country got so few small to mid-cap mining companies operating successfully there? And I think there's part of your answer is the red tape in the system that they're working on, but I think a bit more speed is needed.
Yeah, and it's not only limited to specific mining regulations. I guess it's also probably other areas like foreign investments, visa permits, and all this kind of stuff, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. Our operations are entirely managed by local staff. We only have one expatriate out of 320 staff in country, and even though the law allows us to have an expatriate under an approved work visa system, even that can be problematic after a while. So we have to see on the ground that which the politicians promise. And look, we operate. We've done it fine, but it can be very much a challenge to get these visa applications through for specialised contract advisory services and for your own staff sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Andrew. I know you've been involved in this reform. At least you were in the beginning. What's your view? Because it is a public process, but it's not. I mean, it's kind of semi-transparent, I put it this way. Nobody limits access to this, but nobody tells you what's going on exactly, and you have no access to the specific documents. At least the versions that you saw, what's your opinion on them, and whether we could provide as a feedback to Kazakhstan what should be improved there?
I think something that Nick mentioned before was interesting. It isn't just the mining law, but the way that companies can work in Kazakhstan. When we looked at the initial drafting, there are all sorts of comments, and mining companies and engineering companies commented on them. And as you said, the comments went back, and we were thanked for all the work we did. It's not clear how they're responding to that, other than to say that it's not going to come out quite how we imagined it might, which is understandable. But there are a series of barriers to some of the work that we as an engineering company or a geoscientific company might do in Kazakhstan. Obviously there's an interrelation between things like Kazakh content and licensing for engineering companies and the subsoil user law and now the new mining law that's coming in under that umbrella. So how they all work together is going to be key. We're running with about 350 to nearly 400 people in Kazakhstan at the moment.
Oh, really?
And it's a good business to do. But to some extent it's limited from the point of view of doing the big contracts and getting involved in the big mining expansions that we would like to get involved in. A lot of the work is in the oil and gas sector.
Yep.
It's providing perhaps smaller scale style of work, of engineering work into that area. We've had contracts running for nearly 6 years now, 7 years. They've been great and they work very well. What we'd like to do is be able to understand exactly how the licensing and the engineering and the local content situation works together, so then we can confidently go in to support people like Nick and actually go and build plants there, use all the equipment that's available, use the very considerable skills in country. I mean, they've been mining there for 250 years, something like that. It's a mature market from that point of view.
Yep.
But still, we feel that we'd like to be able to engage in a more clear manner and understand exactly what the consequences of how we register and how we operate our companies.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Can I just?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could I just echo what Andrew says? I mean, there's currently, as anybody who operates in country will know, that you can have design works, engineering design works, undertaken by an internationally accredited company. But it still has to comply with local rules, which is only right and proper. But sometimes that expertise, as it's called, the project construction permit, can take an inordinate amount of time and be held up by really quite minor issues, which are not in any way a commentary on the economic potential of the asset, but more just a difference in style. But it can stop investment being made by companies purely because of very small minor issues, which in any other jurisdiction would not be sufficient to cause a delay. And I think it's that sort of small issue, which can hamper big projects as well.
I mean, the structure of the presentations you make to exercising authorities is pretty important, and the way it's presented, you've got to have a local company preparing those documents.
Yeah.
But how do you get the best outcome in terms of NPV and IRR out of a project by using the international skill set that is available to us? And how can you get that into a document which can then be approved and delivered to the clients? And that's actually quite a difficult process.
Yeah.
Well, indeed, and part of that is you're dealing with engineering institutes who obviously have to adapt, but they may have never come across the type of engineering solutions that are being presented. So, there's work to be done in this area.
Yeah, I will probably have a question to Rose, but then I want other members of panel to comment on this as well. We know that China said that they will invest about $2 trillion US dollars in this Silk Road fund, and Kazakhstan is obviously part of it. And that's on one hand side, and probably I will not want to comment here on behalf of Chinese government, but we know that Kazakhstan, President Nazarbayev came here, and what was the delegation aspirations coming here, and what was their expectations of well, besides for official things that they wanted to get out of this visit and get back to Kazakhstan? And did you feel any involvement or any kind of tension in terms of competing with Chinese fund, or is it involved there at all?
Well, I think the aspiration of the visit was to diversify away from oil and gas. So they're obviously focusing on mining, as are most oil and gas rich countries. I don't think there's any tension with the Chinese offering at all, because there's obviously lots of opportunity in Kazakhstan. But I think, for me, I started this role in July, and I started on the day before a Kazakhstan meeting, the IGC meeting. And for the last 5 months, I've been trying to get to grips with Kazakhstan, and I've no idea what's going on and how to work there. And it's my role to try and increase exports of UK expertise and equipment. And I've no idea how to do that in Kazakhstan. Now, I haven't visited there yet, so maybe it will become more apparent when I visit there. But it does seem to be quite an opaque system. The investment funds and all the ministers and Nazarbayev, who all spoke, are talking about reform, about making things more open. It may be that it's bad timing, it's with the devaluation of the tenge and economic problems in the country. But, having been to Mongolia and not really focused on Mongolia at all, just been talking to people informally about it, having a very, very bad impression of Mongolia before I got there, and then, talking to people when I'm there, it feels like Mongolia, and I'm sure people with more experience will probably contradict me, but it feels like Mongolia, it's easier to do business now than Kazakhstan, actually. And I know in the past it hasn't been, and I know, there was the 106 licenses that were revoked, and there was a lot of, I guess, over-optimistic spending with previous resource booms in Mongolia. But they do seem to be a lot more humble now, a lot more pragmatic. They seem to be quite nimble in changing legislation, and I think there's a real commitment to driving mining development. But as Andrew or somebody said, in Kazakhstan they've been doing mining a long time, but in Mongolia it's fairly recent to them, so they're kind of learning, and they've got that optimism, I guess, that people who are newer at things have. If someone can tell me how to navigate Kazakhstan, I'd be really grateful, actually. I can't figure it out.
Can I ask a question? Rose, at the Intergovernmental Commission meeting during the Nazarbayev's visit, Prime Minister Cameron gave a very upbeat speech about Kazakhstan, about bilateral relations. and the British investment into Kazakhstan. And what I also got an impression that on the political level, Prime Minister Cameron is interested in President Nazarbayev's insight into what's going on in Russia as well. And what do you think about this overall? And I know that Britain also committed to taking part at the Astana Expo 2017.
Yes, and UKTI will have a pavilion at the Astana Expo in 2017. One thing I found was interesting was, even though we had those high-level speeches by Nazarbayev and Cameron, the media didn't pick it up at all. I managed to find one very small article in the City AM the next morning, but nothing else, which, you know, if you think about all the media coverage of the Chinese visit, was quite interesting. So maybe at some political level there is a desire to, align ourselves with Kazakhstan. I don't think the city kind of feels the same urge to do so.
Yeah. I think let's be clear here. My experience of Kazakhstan has, in the whole, been absolutely positive. We built a project out there which many people said couldn't be done. It was designed by Chinese engineering firm out of Beijing. It was adapted by local Kazakh institutes, and we had the support of some very senior people in the ministry. And we built our project on time, under budget, and it's been very much a success, as been evidenced by the results. In a previous life, I worked with a company called Oriel Resources. We built an underground chrome mine in the country. Again, from the time I set foot on that project, 3.5 years later, we'd built a mine. We debt financed a project in Kazakhstan, an underground mine, the first one to be, and the newest one, still is, I think, the newest underground mine in Kazakhstan, and we'd done that in 3.5 years. If you compare and contrast that to any other jurisdiction in the world, you probably would be still waiting for permitting to come in certain areas. So Kazakhstan is absolutely a place you can do business. It is a place you have to know and you have to be in to know how to operate within the country. So, and I know Roz has just come back from Mongolia, and you've come back and she was telling me ahead of this panel discussion is very positive. I've been in Mongolia as well for 5 or 6 years. We've concentrated our efforts in Kazakhstan because it's a place you can do business. I'm looking to not be so busy in Mongolia, and I think that says it from an operating point of view, is that despite the frustrations that you do get in the system in Kazakhstan, you can do business there. And it's very much a place. I would wish that there's great success in this push by the government for foreign direct investment to come into Kazakhstan, because I think it is a great country to do business. If more of us are involved and more of us are there, we will start to change the way things are done. But that only happens by more people coming in and doing and building projects and raising money on the exchange. I know the current market is not conducive to that, but it will turn around. We all know in the resource sector it does turn around. But rather than exploration money or project money go into Africa or South America, there are geopolitical reasons why the likes of Kazakhstan is going to be a much more attractive place to do business as the market turns around. And if they can smarten up the act in terms of how the permitting works, I think it's going to be an absolute outstanding place to do business.
Yep.
That's my view, off the back of having built 2 projects.
Maybe if I can clarify, I think you're looking at it from an operator's point of view, and I'm looking at it from a supplier's point of view.
Oh, yeah.
And from a supplier's point of view, it seems to be difficult to get a foothold there. And I think it's probably because you have to take a partnership approach, so partner with a local company, and particularly to meet local content requirements. And I know it was in the news this week that they've reduced the amount of local content required, which should help, I think. So I don't want you to think I've given up on Kazakhstan. we haven't at all. And we think that the partnership approach is definitely the way to go. And as Andrew said, that's worked in oil and gas, and there's been quite a few bits of work by UK companies in the oil and gas field. So we'll be, as soon as I get some budget, I'll be planning to go over meet with NADLOC and look at potential local partners to see if we can do some business. But I think from what Andrew said, perhaps he felt it was, as a supplier, it's harder to get things done than obviously any country will welcome a mining company who's going in with investment to who will give revenue to the government in a way they wouldn't a supplier.
I think my commentary was to do with trying to understand how the various legal components fit together in terms of engineering licenses and things. You almost need a small team of lawyers advising almost continuously on how you should structure your business, how you should prepare your proposal, how you should structure your local content, in order to make sure that your proposal actually has a chance of winning the work, whether it be a piece of engineering work or supply or an EPCM contract, whatever it may be. If you keep it to specific consulting services, it's fairly simple.
Yep.
But using out-of-country engineers, you'll never get to the point where you can get through the expertising process. You just won't get there, so you have to have partners inside. And most of those partners are probably going to stand up and be independent and willing to work with anybody, rather than being, your own sort of exclusive arrangement, which I think is probably good for Kazakhstan. Otherwise, there will be the actual competitive nature of the market will slowly decrease, and I think that process is probably quite a good policy that they seem to be imposing. And I suppose that rather depends on who owns those organisations. But the good engineering companies, the Kazakh design institutes, stand up and are independent, and they will work with companies such as us in our competition to do that work. And they're very good. They have enormous skills, enormous knowledge of the background, the variability of people, skills, and equipment locally. So they will play a major role, whichever way.
Yeah. Nick, as one of the, obviously Kazakhstan is neighboring country to Russia, and Russia is, we discussed all the sanctions and perceived view of it not being friendly, etc., etc. Do you, and probably Alexander may comment on this as well, do you feel any influence of this Russian malaise on your operations or investments or anything?
No, we don't. Obviously, I think the single largest economic issue that's going on at the moment is the devaluation of the tenge.
Yeah.
I mean, that actually is positive for us because some 50% of our operating costs are tenge denominated, so it is a benefit. But obviously, the tenge is now free floating.
Yep.
It was supported and linked to the dollar. We don't know where the tenge is going to go. We don't know what effect in country any inflationary pressures are going to be there to counteract this devaluation. But in terms of Russian influence, I see less and less. I'm not concerned about it. Nazarbayev, on a number of occasions, has said that we look west now. We look very much to the west and to the east for support. Obviously, there's very close links because there's a free trade union between Russia and Belarus and Kazakhstan, which is useful for us because we import stuff from Russia and we export our product through, and we export our copper through Russia into Turkey. But as to any pressure on us, no, absolutely not. I don't know if Alex would agree.
Turkey will help them. Actually, I was going to say that about 3.5 maybe years ago, some officials from the Committee of Geology, they asked me to help with some contacts in Canada and Australia, and I actually helped provide them with contacts with local geological surveys. As a result, some people from the Committee of Geology, and also from me, which is Ministry for Investment and Development, they went both to BC and to Australia. And as a result, now it mutated into moving to Georgia and all these square-shaped licenses. So I was involved in partly by that. You're completely independent, so I'm an observer at the moment. In terms of permitting process, I agree with Nick, and we have some joint experience as well. But we can overcome this if you do in parallel. For example, in the case of our project, there was an SRK involved, and SRK was doing the work basically in parallel in conjunction with local institute. So as a result, all this incompatibility, if you would say, in terms of the size of your bolts or whatever, it was not an issue at all. But you have to allow about 12 months in terms of because it requires to collect quite many signatures. It has gone through many experts, etc. Some of them independent, some of them are not quite independent, but it goes through this. But major issues for the companies, whether it's big or small, is that if you want to raise capital, if you want to issue your more shares in order to raise capital, you need to turn in an approval from the Kazakh government, for one of the boards. So which means that you have to file this, and you can wait quite a lot. If you leave it on your own, it may go for 12 months or even longer. I think Nick, you have experience with this, like changing, not actually, you change the shareholding.
Yeah, we just went from, to list the company, went from limited to a PLC. We had to do that ahead of listing. But it was deemed by the lawyers in Kazakhstan that changing the shares from a limited company to a PLC, no extra shares, nothing, was a change of ownership. And that required state approval that took us 7, 8, 9 months.
So
It was in any other jurisdiction, it's just literally a 5-minute job.
So in Kazakhstan there is bureaucracy. Yes, we want to control what's happening in the country. We appreciate this. Every country has a right to do it. But we have to allow this time. And if we are in volatile times like now, when commodity prices move and share prices move, so it's very sensitive. So in like 6 months time, your share price will be nothing if you wait so long. Because it's a month, next month. And joke, movement to joke is fine. There will be no like double accounting which exists at the moment, because companies have to comply with the basically Soviet systems. Once you do one, you solve the Russian sessions, and at the same time, in order to raise money here, they do a job. Now it will be eliminated. It will help, but it is only part of the problem. So bureaucracy exists, fine, but it should work faster.
Well, now it's probably natural to go to David and ask about Kazakhstan signing an agreement with Krirsco, because, well, David was involved in drafting and in signing IN code in Russia, and he's got lots of experience implementing international standards, and obviously it's not only positive experience, so we can learn from it, and I think David can comment on that.
Yeah, Alexei. I was involved with the Krirsco initiative to develop the 9 code in Russia. I was actually a representative for the GKZ on that side of things. And I've been asked to speak here by the Krirsco committee, because unfortunately they can't be here because they happen to be in Brazil at times, but they have to go over there to go and sign an accord in Brazil. Krirsco is trying to promote transparency and communication and get a common language around the globe as far as the minerals industry is concerned, to try and help investors when they're looking at a project in one country or another project in another country, they can be able to have some more equal comparisons. Now that's difficult because even if you look within, say, Canada or Australia, even with using the JORC code, you're not going to end up with things being perfectly comparable. So, but it is a process. It's a long process. It's going to take a long time. And there is an aim within those, desire within Kazakhstan to modernize their approach. But the approach that they've inherited from the Soviet Union time was actually a very good approach. It was actually an approach which was ahead of Krirsco at its time, in so much that it was already classifying the confidence of resource estimates by the different levels. It had a much more structured approach. It's still ahead of Krirsco in some aspects, that it classifies complexity. So it looks at a gold deposit, doesn't just say it's gold. It says it's at a type 1, type 2, 3 or 4. So you get a better understanding as to whether this is a complex deposit or a simple deposit. It's still ahead of Krirsco in some aspects, that it's captured knowledge built up over the years to say that if it is a Type 4 deposit, this is the sort of data spacing which is likely to give you enough confidence to be able to make decisions. So in some areas there's a very close link between the Soviet, now the Russian and Kazakh approaches and the Kursk approaches. But it's now time to move further forward, bringing in much more of the economic aspect in, bringing in more of the transparency and some of the materiality aspects, so that people can understand, what is this important? Do you have to do it this way, or can you take a few shorter steps because these other areas are not material for this deposit? Bring in more flexibility and so on. The Russian experience is really it's in the next phase. There was a move towards to say let's communicate. They came up with a template which was quite prescriptive. If C1, then that equals measured. If C2, that equals indicated. But then there's a catch-up clause at the bottom which says, but the competent person can decide. One of the things you've got to understand with that aspect is that the Russian system essentially mirrors the legal code of the country, which is based on the civil code. So we've got to go step back to Napoleon and blame him, because he wrote up the rules for basically most of Europe, which said everything's going to be very defined. Meanwhile, the Anglo-Saxons said, bugger that, we're just going to make things up as we go along, but on principles, based on principles. So we've got a different structure. Now, it happens to be that a lot of the mining codes, a lot of the global industries happen to be based on English-speaking ones, for people from Canada, from Australia, from South Africa, from the UK. So we had a common language, we had a common style, we've sort of like pioneered this particular approach. And now we're going into countries which have actually got a different approach. And it's just a matter of working between those to understand how to get their things to work more effectively. Also, you've got to understand that there are some differences between the skills levels and the technologies. You've got a history which has said, well, we've done it this way, now you want it to do some way differently, but if we do it differently, am I going to get the right figure? Is it, have we got people with the right skills to be able to make this judgment? And if I say tomorrow it's this and yesterday it was that, I'm still the same person, but I'm now saying two different things. What's going to happen to me? So there are these issues which need to work through. Yeah, so there's a lot of these issues. I mean, at the moment, there's a lot of, in Russia, they are taking some advantage of the flexibility of the Kursk codes about somebody could just stand up and say, I'm a competent person. Now, we can blame ourselves. How do we have a self-regulating approach. I can say I'm a competent person for this, but I wouldn't say I'm a competent person for that. Whereas that hasn't gone full circle yet. So in Russia, people can stand up, oh, God, I can get a job if I say I'm a competent person, so I'll just put my hand up and I'll be competent for everything. So with the Kazakh initiative, it's slightly different. It's going to have some elements of that. They want to try to steer towards a slightly different style. It's going to be a long process going between these aspects because of the there's a lot of learning to do, there's a lot of skills to be acquired. And in some aspects, Kursk has also got to go some way towards the styles that they have. They may have to actually start defining a few things. Kursk is also in communication with most of the South American countries to bring in Brazil, Argentina, Colombia in. They're in discussions with the Chinese, in discussions with the Indonesians. So they've got to try and come up with some system which is going to work for all these countries. At the end of the day, it's really going to be up to the investment community to apply the pressure, as it is within Australia, within the UK, as to whether these codes are effective. Is the JORC code doing the job? But it got asked to update things. That's why the JORC 2012 came out. And so there's always going to be this constant pressure, and that's going to be the same thing with Kazakhstan as with Russia, to evolve them and go forward. Sorry it was a long answer, but there's a few things there.
Well, to my opinion, actually, it's a bit of question whether you go for a free economy, and then it is up to specific entrepreneur or capitalist or whatever you name it, to decide on methodology to use and whether it's most advantageous to him and to his shareholders or not, or he's going to take this risk. Well, I mean, we obviously cannot directly compare Russian reporting and Georgia because purposes are very different. Russian reporting is designed to inform the state of his own assets, and as you know, it's pretty much like everywhere else, but the subsoil by constitution belongs to the state, and it's the same in Kazakhstan. While Georgia code and other critical codes, they are designed to inform investors and not the state. And that's, I think, the huge difference, and that's where problem lies, because people are trying to directly compare those two, and as we know, they're not comparable, just because they are fundamentally different in terms of purpose. So coming back to this, going for free market or going to regulated market, I think that's a huge. That's where the dilemma lies actually. Not doing GKZ or Georgia or Crisco. It is, do we want a developed market economy with marketable resources sector, or do we want to control it? And well, to my personal understanding, it's a bit populistic to say, well, we own all this subsoil and that's what we bring to our nation. And that's what I think both Russia and Kazakhstan actually should decide on.
Well, it's going to be a long evolutionary process. I don't think that's something that can happen today. It's not. They're not suddenly going to make that judgment. You've also got this issue as far as history that, one of the strengths of the GKZ system was there was this state review of the resource estimates. And in general, if you look at the investments people have made, in general, the quality of the data that was collected in the Soviet period was to a very high standard, and there was some very good, reliable work done. And probably when you start looking at the fraud cases and the various problems, you're actually looking at all the Crisco type countries or the Crisco type companies who've had the frauds. So you've got, again, it's the change of style. And one of the, you've got issues with regards to the skill levels within the country. Do people have the skills to be able to do the resource estimates? You've also got a degree of this desire of control. Yesterday we said it was big, and then tomorrow you change the system and now it's suddenly small. Am I going to get fired for this? So I think it's something which is going to be an evolutionary process. It's going to take 10, 15 years. And it's just really up to the international market to say, look, this is actually important. We do really want this. And a lot of the other areas, it doesn't really matter because there's a lot of commonality. But in the areas that do matter, it's up to the investment community to say, actually, this is important. I want to see this done.
Will it not be a natural evolution? So in Mongolia, some of the state coal companies who need to get extra finance to move to Mesa, Russia, and Bangalore have made JORC resource estimates because they know they'll have to do that to get finance internationally.
To a certain extent, we're seeing in the Russian banks, for example, they are requiring that not just the resource estimates, but more importantly, the study estimates, to say, well, we want to see a feasibility study type standard. So it's not just having a project which is defines all the details and it's good for getting the permissions, but they want to make sure that the economic rigor is there. So they're saying, look, we want to see the feasibility aspects. So a lot of it is going to be, this evolution will go forward. There will be, the best ideas will be developed and incorporated, and some of the historical aspects will drop away and wither.
I agree that I think the basic issue to overcome is one is a risk-based system and subjective, somewhat subjective, that your code is down to a competent person and his interpretation, and then an application nowadays in terms of some economic parameters around numbers, whereas the old C1 and C2 system is much more rigid. And so, but this is also, I think, exemplified by the political bureaucratic system, which is based very much around a rule, and you either comply with that rule, or if you do not, you're outside of it, and a decision is made, yes or no. There's no grey area, there's no boundaries for any disagreement, and say, well, okay, I can understand where you come from. Yeah, you don't. That is prescriptive, and until such time as we've got a system whereby people can understand those risk-based decisions, don't have to have an actual black and white answer to every technical question, that there is a boundaries can move, and this is why a big project today, or big resource today, can tomorrow become a less big, because the economic factors being applied just don't make it as attractive. So until we've got that sort of level of understanding in the system that applies the rules, we're going to always have these disagreements.
Yeah, there's always more comfortable to be able to make a decision. Say it's written down in here that it's got to be black, and if it's not black, then it doesn't get past us. It's always easy to make decisions like that, as you say, and it's just a matter of how a country wishes to develop or how its circumstances go forward, as to what level, how much comfort it can have with uncertainty and being able to make more flexible decisions.
I mean, you can make a decision in the country, but you have to have the people to implement it. And currently, I don't think that runs through the system, so it will take some while.
Yep.
And they're moving towards it.
Yep.
Maybe the audience have a question. Well, I actually, my thinking about this was whether Kazakhstan can really afford this 10, 15 years waiting, because the problem is that, again, to my humble understanding, is that we are now using, and Russia as well, we are now using resources that were discovered in Soviet Union, more or less, and they are being depleted. So in 10, 15 years' time, we'll surely see a decline in production, and having pretty much zero junior mining, or zero exploration, or next to zero exploration. And we know that from discovery to production may take 7, 10, 20 years, depending on the deposit. Don't you think those countries, both of them, are in essence, they're not aware of this, but they are in rush for this change? Because long term, and that's a question to everybody here, long term they will face this huge problem.
I mean, exploration is going on, and they are keen for it. Obviously, they have different views as to how exploration should be conducted. I don't think that any of these, going to JORC or anything like that is going to change the pressures as to whether exploration happens. It's more the bureaucratic issues and more the commercial aspects which are going to drive things. I think there is a building pressure towards the exploration side of things. They have, a few years ago, there was the riots in Kazakhstan when one of the communities was going to be closed down. The Monogorod issue is a significant social challenge for countries in the region. They're going to need the exploration.
All of those are going to end up. Alexander,
I think you are wrong that the resources, the Soviet resources are being depleted. If you look at Kazakhs, they're now developing Boshikut, they're developing Akhtagai, they're developing Ksai.
Yep.
These countries, Boshikut was discovered in 1989.
Yep.
Akhtagai went through all the Ksai approvals in 1984. And Ksai, I think, 86.
Yep.
So, and staying there. So they're now building the mines around them.
Yep.
What happens simultaneously with Kazakh copper production since 1991? They had about 350,000 tons of copper per annum production. It's still more or less the same now. Because of fluctuation of the copper prices, etc., the population more or less stayed the same, so they maintain their production. If you compare global copper production from 2000 and 2000 was 10 million tons of copper annual production. In 2014 it was 17 million tons. So it was 70% growth just within a matter of 14 years. In Kazakhstan, nothing changed. It just lost their share of the market. But for more or less stable population like they have, it's more or less enough.
No, but it is not a developed economy, so production rates are very low, and if you compare just Kazakhstan, all the Soviet deposits with 100,000 employees, and then Bolshakol or Koksai or Aktogai with 3,000 people operating it. So essentially it means that you will need another 30 Bolshakols to keep those people busy. So you need to do...
Generation. When the current deposits are completely depleted, then they will apply the new economic parameters to help.
No, but
they will not have to build big towns near them. It will be a much smaller in terms of employees, to the number of employees running.
Yep.
So it will change naturally, but they couldn't just drop what they have.
No, I agree. What I'm saying is that the more exploration they do, the better it will be. I'm not arguing with what you're saying. Yeah. Do we have more questions? We definitely have more people in the audience, but we have less questions. That's probably because we're all encompassing and covered everything. Yeah. And close the meeting. Thank you very much.